Hey y'all, welcome to Geek Freaks. I am Frank, and today I'm joined by Kyle and Kevin, both famous streamers that have been helping me out so much on my road to affiliate, so I really appreciate you guys' help. Kyle and Kevin, why don't you guys give a shout out to where they can find your stream, where they can find you guys on Twitch, Twitter, and all the social media platforms.
Famous streamer. I like that. My name is Kevin. I go by Kevin Injection on Twitch. I used to run and co-host a podcast called Pushing Buttons, where we talk about video games all the time. And yeah, I play games on Twitch now.
Yeah, famous is a bit of a stretch, but I like the designation nonetheless. I want to be a famous streamer someday. But you can find me at twitch.tv/monumentuskyle. I try to stream as much as I can, but it's kind of sporadic right now. And I am also formerly of the Pushing Buttons podcast, along with Kevin Injection.
Yep, that's where I discovered these guys and was on board right away. We both started our podcast at the same time and kind of kept an eye on each other. And then, sure enough, when I started streaming, I'm like, well, let me emulate these guys, and here we are today. So it's worked out well for me. Okay, so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to go ahead and go over our top 5 favorite game developers. Should be exciting list. I'm hoping we don't have too many copies. I thought for sure we would, so we'll see how that goes. But let's warm up with some questions out of the Geek Box. And I'm pulling one out right now.
Oh, yeah.
Which Final Fantasy did you play the most?
I would have to say it's either Final Fantasy X or 12.
Okay.
And I remember grinding the hell out of Final Fantasy 12, so I'm going to go with that
12,
one.
okay.
I played that back on the PS2 when it first came out, way back in like 2005, I think. But I had a lot of fun with that game. It took me a long time to beat, but it was a lot of fun.
What would you say was fun about it? Was it characters or story?
I actually really liked the gambit system. I thought it was a really cool way of playing the game. I mean, for the most part, it just, the efficiency involved with allocating certain gambits to certain characters and designating certain roles. Like I had Bosch as the tank, I had Ash as the healer, and then I had, I think, a mixture between Vaughn and Baltier for DPS. I probably said that wrong. Baltier?
I won't judge you. You're right. Okay. Yeah. See, I need to really sink my teeth into a Final Fantasy, so I tried Final Fantasy 14, played maybe 20 minutes, and I was out. So I can't say too much about it. Yeah. What about you, Kevin?
So I don't really have that much experience with Final Fantasy. I've probably played 2 of them to any extent. Final Fantasy X, I stopped around the Blitzball period because I thought that was more of a chore than fun, and I kind of try to.
Yeah,
yeah, I do. I couldn't get into it. I don't know why. That's what everybody else says, is that they love it. And then Final Fantasy VI is the one that I really, really liked, that I wish I would have finished, but I didn't stick with it. Was my problem.
Yeah.
I still haven't gotten around to that one, but I want to play it.
Oh, you'll like it if you like old school RPGs, like the best of Super Nintendo, right there.
Nice.
That's a good way to sell something right there. Next one out of the box, and we're going to be starting with you first, Kevin. Do you buy single issues of comics or wait for the trade?
So typically, unless I'm really, really excited for it, and I don't buy that many comics anymore, but when I did, I would buy them issue by issue if it was something that I started buying as it was coming out. But if it was something that I just found out about recently, or right as I was going to the store doing my research before going to the comic book shop, I would just buy the trade paperbacks.
Yeah. What about you, Kyle?
Well, I don't necessarily buy comic books, so I hope to get blasted on here, but...
Put that Twitter out again one more time.
Is that too spooky for Robert?
There you go. But if I were to buy comics, I would probably find one I like that I can sink my teeth into and buy them issue by issue as they came out.
Yeah. Yeah, when I was younger, I tried to do issue by issue, but as an adult now, I try to do by trades because trades tend to come out with a whole story arc together. So if I happen to miss a few comics, whatever, I can pick up the trade and catch up with the story as an entirety. It's hard as an adult. As a kid, you're like, oh man, they're $1.50. They're real cheap back when we were kids, and hey mom, I just need the next one or whatever. And it was all about collecting them. As an adult, it's like, look, I don't have that much time, so when I do have time, I don't want to be left on too many cliffhangers. I want to know what's going on, So trades is the way to go, I think, is as you grow up.
The trades also look better on a bookshelf.
They really do. Yeah, they actually do. You get the spine. It looks good. All right, let's do one more card. And this one is, Which fandoms do you belong to? Oh boy, this is a hard one for a geek podcast. Let's go ahead and start with you, Kyle.
I would have to go with obviously World of
Yeah,
Warcraft. The Blizzard. I play a lot of Blizzard games like Hearthstone, Overwatch, World of Warcraft, of course. So that'd be a big one. And on the other side of the spectrum, on like movies, books, I'm a big Lord of the Rings
good
fan.
choice.
I've read all the books. I've tried to, get into a lot of the lore of the series, and I can't wait for the new Amazon Prime show coming out in the next year or two.
Yeah, I know. Me too, man. What about you? What about you, Kevin?
Most of the things that I really get into geek wise are science fiction related. So Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar
Yeah,
Galactica, Stargate. I love all of them. The Star Wars franchise is probably my favorite set of movies of all time, and the Star Trek Next Generation is my favorite TV show of all time.
that's some awesome lineage right there. Honestly, you can't go wrong with either of those. Uh, what myself, it's hard, it's so much easier to say what I'm not into, which is basically Doctor Who. Yeah, it's a tough one. So like video game wise, uber fan of the Blizzard world. TV wise, you got your Game of Thrones, and I mean it's hard to say that's TV, but yeah, book wise, Game of Thrones as well, and Lord of the Rings. Comics, Saga. I cannot wait for the last part of Saga. It's driving me nuts that it's not out yet, and I took a break. Come on, guys. Yeah, I love wasting time, and so that feeds into a lot of hobbies. It's easy one to do. All right, so let's go ahead and get to our main topic, guys. We're going to be going over our top 5 game developers. And Kevin, we're going to start with you. What is your number 5 game developer?
Oh, number 5. I went with Sony Online
Oh,
Entertainment.
okay.
Now, hear me out. Hear me out. They aren't known for too many games, but the ones that they are known for are good. EverQuest was it took what Ultima Online did with an MMO and made it something massive and appealing on a scale that hadn't been seen since until World of Warcraft came out. I think they revolutionized the modern MMORPG, and Star Wars Galaxies is in my top 5 favorite games of all
Mhm.
time until Sony Online ruined that. But that's another story. They sink their teeth into something and they can do it really well. And at the time, they were major pioneers in that field.
What other games you were mentioning the online games? What other games do they have?
Like 21 expansions to EverQuest and EverQuest
Yeah.
2. Um, I, as far as I'm aware, they only did like major MMOs.
Quick note. So if you're a World of Warcraft fan, uh, it's funny is the team that made World of Warcraft was actually working on another game that was about like weasels or rats or something like that. It was an interesting game, sure, but whatever.
Oh, strange.
Yeah, so they were working on another game, but while they were working on that game, they were playing EverQuest at home and in the office. And then finally, in the break room or something like that, a couple of them were talking like, "Why don't we just make an EverQuest and World of Warcraft?" So EverQuest led into World of Warcraft in more ways than one, like literally. So if you're a WoW fan, you got to thank EverQuest.
That's some crazy history that I didn't know about.
Yeah. All right, Kyle, let's get into your number 5.
All right. So I wanted to kick things off with a really big one. It's Capcom.
Ooh.
I feel
Oh,
like, in particular, they've made a lot of franchises that I've
hmm
grown up with over the past couple of decades. Of course, you got Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, and of course, Mega Man, all that stuff, Dead
yeah.
Rising. Just a lot of variety between their whole category of games. Me personally, I really enjoy the Devil May Cry series and the Resident Evil series. It's just seen a lot of evolution over the years, some good, some bad, mostly good. And, I can't wait to see what Capcom's up to next. They've just been on a roll lately, especially with Resident Evil. I feel like
Yeah.
with the remakes that they've come out with and with Devil May Cry 5, I think the potential is back, like for Capcom to really hit a home run in the coming years.
There's such a stand-up company. One of my favorite games with their name in it, anyways, is the Marvel vs. Capcoms.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
Yeah. I love the fighting games too. I'm not good at them, but
yeah.
one day maybe.
What would you want to see a Devil May Cry 1 remake like they're doing with all the Resident Evils?
It would be great to see that. I don't know if it's coming anytime soon, but I know the first two games in particular could really use a great update.
Hmm
Even the third one, I haven't really seen too many news, but I know they've remastered it a lot. So hopefully it's in the cards for the coming years.
Yeah. Because I'm looking back and I'm thinking, I mean, number one was one of those that me and my friends were all playing, and I think with today's Dark Soul environment and Bloodborne environment, there can be there can be a world for it there. You know what I'm saying? Where there's like number one remastered with a new level of difficulty that pars with Bloodborne, and those would be really fun. I think that actually sell well nowadays.
Yeah, speaking of remasters, I know Capcom does an excellent job with those as well.
Hmm.
Of course, with the Resident Evil 2 and the Resident Evil 3 remake, which I haven't played yet, but I want to. They just did an outstanding job bringing that to modern audiences,
Yeah,
and I would love to see them do the same thing with Devil May Cry. But they just have a lot of great stuff coming, like Resident Evil 8. I can't wait to see what that's about.
yeah.
And of course, with all their other franchises, maybe we'll have a good Dead Rising game. Who knows?
I really like Dead Rising 1. That was a lot of fun. That was game changing right there. Just like, oh, here's an open world with everything's a weapon. And just have fun.
Yeah, I used to
That's a good one.
go over to Kevin's place and play his Xbox 360 at the time, and I played Dead Rising like crazy.
Yeah.
Those
Hey,
were the
move over. I
days.
gotta kill zombies. All right. My number five is gonna be Game Freak. They were originally founded as a video game magazine over in Japan. I didn't know that. That was pretty cool. They started in the early 80s, and then in 89, they decided to, hey, let's make our own gaming company. They keep reporting on the NES. They wanted to make games for the NES. So that was their main focus for many years until eventually they decided to make this little, like, unknown game called Pokemon.
Yeah.
Uh, since then, that has clearly been their focus. They've come out with a few other other games that are not Pokemon related. Generally, it's just a new Pokemon game here and there. I got to give them prop. In 2019, they did announce they're going to be spreading their attention, so they're actually going to try to expand their brand and move past the Pokemon games. But it's impressive to think of a company that's created this brand back in the early 90s and has built an empire on just the one brand. It shows how much fans can attach themselves to these characters that are in a video game because you're playing with them and stuff like that. And when nurtured correctly, can become this whole empire. Mangas and TV series are based off of this video game, and nowadays Pikachu is one of the most recognized characters in fiction. And here's this little game company that had a magazine that wanted to do more. So my number five is definitely Game Freak.
Here's the question: what's your favorite Pokemon game?
Man, the Sword and Shield was really good. I have to. I know it's so hard because Yellow, like that's my first one. Well, no, Blue was my first one, but Yellow was like my first. Like I'm gonna clear this thing. Yeah, it's a tough one. Silver was really good. They're all great games. Like they definitely take a lot of care of their games. But I have Shield, and Shield is like perfect game. It's really good. Good story. The online was done well. Yeah, design, good stuff. Got to
Nice.
go with that one.
When you start a Pokemon game, do you typically go with the same starter type over and over again in every iteration, or do you just choose one from the three that you like the most?
The one that I like the most. Generally, I'll try to go water because it is the most difficult run. Well, let's see, water. Yeah, water. I think is because I'll try to see which one's the hardest one to do because that's one thing with sticking to a formula for so many years is it's kind of easier to understand it and be able to beat it. So go fire. You're gonna go get grass type in the beginning. But yeah, I generally try to go water. Especially back in the early days when it was Bulbasaur. I mean not Bulbasaur, Squirtle, who's freaking legend. Yeah.
Yeah, me myself, I've only really played Red and Gold before I lost interest in the franchise, but I tended to stick with the grass type.
Yeah.
And if I were to come back to Pokemon, I'd probably still do the same thing.
The current grass type's really cool. It's this. I think his name's Gookie, but he becomes like this one called Billabong, and he's just half gorilla, half grass type. He's a really cool guy. It's an awesome one.
I also, along with you, I usually went with the water one. I just like
Yeah.
Squirrel so much in the original one. Yellow was my first Pokemon game that I played. That every time after that, I had to go with the the water.
Yeah, yeah. Squirtle's great. Blastoise, he's amazing. And then like in the cartoon, he had the Squirtle Squad, which is one of the best episodes.
Oh, I love that.
So yeah. So that's a classic. It's such a good franchise. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to our next one. Kyle, you're gonna start us off this time. What is your number four?
All right. So interestingly, I decided to go a little bit further in depth with Capcom, and I'm picking Platinum Games as my number four developer.
Okay.
So if you're not aware, Platinum Games was actually founded by employees of Capcom that decided to branch
Hmm.
out on their own. It was formed by Shinji Mikami, who is, of course, notorious for the Resident Evil franchise, with his crowning achievement being Resident Evil 4. After that, he left Capcom. And then Hideki Kamiya of the Devil May Cry series, he also joined Shinji Mikami in making Platinum Games. And they just have, from time to time, provided some of the best action games I have ever played. I mean, the list is pretty big. You have, of course, Bayonetta, Vanquish, Nier Automata recently, and coming up soon, we have so many other great games coming out from them. And of course, my all-time favorite, Metal Gear Rising. I love that game so much.
Did they work on any of the other Metal Gears or no?
No, just that one title.
It's funny that you say that because I'm like, okay, I'm not familiar with Metal or with Platinum, but then as soon as you say Bayonetta, you're like, oh, I could see the Devil May Cry inspiration there. The art style, the movement style, you kind of can see it in that game.
Yeah, Bayonetta is basically Devil May Cry on steroids. It's insanely action packed. And shockingly enough, I haven't played Bayonetta 2 yet, and I've heard that's even better.
Wait, what?
Yeah, exactly.
You haven't
what are you doing playing Minecraft?
I'm pretty behind on a lot of my favorite franchises, actually. But interestingly, when they were with Capcom, prior to splitting from them, they were known as Clover Studios. And they also made Okami and Beautiful Joe. So they kind of got their start making those games, which I also loved.
Yeah, Okami's legendary.
And of course, the all-time notorious game, God Hand. That's a truth. You haven't played that.
Oh, man.
That's a good choice, man. That was a deep dive. Now I'm wanting to look into them.
Yeah, I try my best to always play as best as I can, but I always kind of tend out to be average at them. But if I had more time with gaming, I would definitely, try and level up in those particular action adventure games.
Yeah. Try to 100% them.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to Kevin now. Kevin, what is your number 4?
My number 4 pick is, and it's for one particular reason, CD Projekt Red. And I am not a big fan of The Witcher, and I don't see myself playing much of Cyberpunk 2077.
So why do you say that?
Exactly, right? That's what I love about this. So The Witcher is a fantastic series. I loved as much of the first one as I played. I loved the second one. I couldn't get into the third one so much, but it's more what they've done for game developers in general, being good old games. GOG.com, GOG Galaxy, their DRM free service for buying games. It was the first legitimate competitor that Steam had, and doing everything DRM free, basing it off of their own games to boot, is just a fantastic. There's a business model. Yeah, it's a fantastic business model, and they just put everything into whatever they're doing, and it shows with every project that they've had.
That's a good call, and I like the way it's based off of what they did for the industry, more so than just their games.
Yeah, because you can go back nowadays and play old games that wouldn't normally run on modern PCs that they've actually revitalized and made to run on current PCs, and the current generation of gamers can actually play old school games that they hear people like us talk about that we loved from back in the day.
Last year in October, I was streaming Fear, and I never played the expansions. And I had it all on Steam installed, ready to go. But the Steam versions were absolutely unoptimized. They did not run. So I ended up going to GOG, buying them on there. They ran perfectly after I installed them. So
it's
props
incredible.
To them. Yeah.
That's good work. And it's something that as computers go, things will fall by the wayside. But the video game industry is at an age now where we start to archive our own work now. And we want to look back at what's got us here. It's the same thing with film. You could look back at like these old films and it shows this growth in an industry. So we don't necessarily want to forget these old games. And because of video games, they have to be interactive. It's not like we could just watch a walkthrough. So it's good that there's a company out there that's taking them and making them playable so that people can experience where we came from, Okay, we're going to be moving on to mine now. We have number 4. Oh, okay, this is a good one. Atari.
Ooh.
Interesting.
Yeah, I went with Atari, not the 15 different people that owned them, but the original Atari, founded in Sunnyvale, California in 1972 by the amazing Nolan Bushnell. If you're not familiar with, and Ted Dabney at the time, but Bushnell is this like young version of the tech geniuses we know today, the personalities and stuff like that. Atari was the first Google or Apple or Facebook or Twitter where the culture, the brand was around them, not just their system itself. They started off making arcades and these Pongs, and Bushnell is a fun story. So a lot of my information is coming from a podcast called The Dollop, and this is one of their episodes. It's really good when you guys check it out. It goes all the way to the burial in the desert, if you guys know what I'm talking about. Bushnell used to hide in the back seat with an axe when his guys would go out to get the quarters out of the Atari machines, because people would break out and attack people with axes if they tried to mess with them. He was such a badass. He had a philosophy that he didn't care what time you showed up to work, if you were high, if you were drunk, if you wore shirts or no shirts, as long as you got your job done and you got it done right. People started to copy his arcade machines. He ended up mislabeling things like, oh yeah, this is this kind of processor. It was just a sticker that was on there. It was actually a whole other kind of processor. So that when people would steal the motherboards or whatever and try to mimic them, they would get them all wrong. So this guy was a game developer in the Wild West of game developing. And he ended up wanting to, hey, I want to make these, but I want them playable at home. So he was the first one to really push for that playable at home thing. There were other consoles that were there, but they weren't like for the masses, yet. He was the first one that wanted to make it for the masses. He started to get these movie tie-ins, famously the E.T. one. But if you guys are all familiar with Pitfall, that was originally because they got the license for Indiana Jones. He's the reason that we have the gaming industry we have today. He really started off, and he's one of those first tech gurus that we had back in the day. He eventually sold off his company, and then it was sold throughout the line, but in 84 is when he sold it off, after the 83 crash of video games. He then went off to found Chuck E. Cheese. So,
oh, dang.
Yeah. Nolan Bushnell has an eye on the ball. Atari was one of these companies that at a time was unstoppable, was worth the same as Apple. And actually what's funny is Wozniak and Jobs, was it Jobs? I think it was Jobs, went to Bushnell and says, hey, we got the small company. They both worked for him. We got the small company. If you want to put in $50K, you could be a third of the company. He's like, I respect you guys, but right now I'm so busy with Atari, I can't. So they were like, all right, we appreciate that. They left the company to start their own. That is Apple. And he missed out on joining Apple. But, it's just, he was one of the first like legends in the gaming world. So I'm going to give it up for Atari for number 4.
Not a lot of people could turn down Apple and still become a legend this many years later.
Some of the early stories of how he used to do things, like he tried to sell the system to somebody, and when they came over, he was like, all right, first thing we're going to do, we're going to get drunk. He was just like, he would party with like these executives from Japan or whatever. And he's like, we're going to do box races through the office. And he would put them in boxes and like push them down really fast. And like, they're in suits, dude. They're not familiar with your let's party, bro lifestyle. But he was a legend. Did you guys ever have Atari systems growing up?
Not me, no.
No, I didn't either. First one I ever had was just the NES.
Same, yeah. I now own one out of respect, mostly, but the NES was kind of my starter one as well. So I miss this one a bit. But my parents had one. They had the Pong, and that was like the shit back in the day. Now I'm looking back at it, and I'm like, but how? That's a screensaver, a bad one. All right, let's go ahead and move into our tier 3. I'm going to start us off with tier 3 as well. And this one's real poignant for the game that we were playing last night. My number 3 is going to be Rare. So Rare was founded as Ultimate Play the Game. By the way, way to name a company. That's an excellent name. Ultimate Play the Game in 85. They were a little indie company, but ended up making a deal with the newish company Nintendo, who gave them an unlimited budget to make games for their Famicom system, which eventually would become NES for the US. With that new salary of infinite, they ended up pumping out a ton of titles for them and working with a bunch of new companies, 3 of them called Acclaim, which we all know Acclaim now today, Electronic Arts, which they charge us for all our microtransactions, and then Sega, which would become an NES competitor. So Rare was the guys behind the scenes for so many of the big companies we know today.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They are responsible for taking Donkey Kong and making him a hero, because originally he was just a villain. And they created Donkey Kong Country, and then would have furthered that brand into its own franchise, including Diddy Kong Racing, which was their first self-published title game. It had open world and had different vehicles. To me, it was better than Super Mario Brothers or Super Mario Kart. By the way, did you guys play Diddy Kong Racing?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
totally.
Classic. In 2002, they decided to partner with Microsoft, and they've been doing that since then. And they are the bridge between Microsoft and Nintendo. And since then, hold on, what was the first game? It was Diddy Kong for the DS. So some of the characters on Diddy Kong Racing are licensed by the other company. Rare got them both to sit at the table and share in the property so that they can make it for the DS and use some of what was now owned by Xbox. So I think it was mostly Conquer. And since then, Nintendo and Microsoft has been working together on a lot of like smaller projects, and eventually, rumors are out there that Xbox games will be able to stream to your Switch. The first game that was Microsoft made, moved over to the Switch was Cuphead, and there's going to be more upcoming. And a lot of that is because of Rare getting them to the table.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah.
I love Cuphead. That's really fascinating.
It's such a hard game. I can't freaking beat it. I'm so stuck on that game. Other hits from this company include Banjo-Kazooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day, GoldenEye 007, one of the best N64 games ever. Everything Donkey Kong, Viva Pinata, Killer Instinct, and of course, Sea of Thieves. This they stay humble and small. They're from the UK. I was telling Kyle about this. One of their offices is literally decked out like the hull of a ship. So that's where they do like their meetings every week with everybody at home. Like, oh, this is what's going on with Sea of Thieves. It actually looks like you're inside one of the ships. It's really cool.
Oh, that's badass. I'd love to work there.
Oh yeah, it's such a cool little company. But yeah, they've been behind so many games that we know and love today. They empower Nintendo. They are currently powering Microsoft's library. What a wonderful company. Any games in the Rare library outside of Diddy Kong Racing that you guys are fans of?
Me personally, I love the Banjo-Kazooie series. I also a hidden gem I'll say is Jet Force Gemini for the Nintendo 64. I don't know if you played that one. Oh yeah, that was a great game. I'm sure it didn't age well by today's standards, but at the time it was a fun third-person shooter. Basically, you have two characters, they're brother sister, and they have to rescue these tribals, which are like, giant furry bears or something from these evil alien bugs. And when you shoot these things, they explode into guts and goo and all that. So I don't know. It was a fun game for the time being.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that before. That sounds
surprised.
Like it's fun.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah. What about you, Kevin? Any Rare titles that you're a big fan of?
No, I honestly didn't play too many of them, to be perfectly honest. I missed out on a large portion of my childhood.
I don't blame you. I mean, for me, when they were first acquired by Microsoft, I was kind of bummed because they lost all their access to those franchises. I mean, of course, they did Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, which I haven't played. But the only thing I really know about them is that they also did the Kinect Avatar system, if I'm not mistaken. And then Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Right. And that's about it. And that's the last I heard of them until Sea of Thieves came out.
Yeah, after Grabbed by the Ghoulies, they did a game called Cameo, which you could tell was like...
Oh, Cameo, that's right. Yeah.
Microsoft put so much into that. They really thought that was going to be their new breakout. It was actually a really well-made game. It just didn't grab people. I played it. It was a lot of fun. It was a good platformer.
And, I rented that one on GameFly.
On GameFly. There we go. We should do a special episode about GameFly. They're still out there, guys.
They're renting movies now, too.
That's so nuts. All right, let's go ahead and go on to Kyle.
So, number 3. So, I actually had a really contentious bout with picking my number 3. Okay. Basically, I'm focusing more so on the advancement of narrative storytelling. Mm-hmm. So I'll tell you the 3 that I came close to the wire. You have Sony Santa Monica Studios, Naughty Dog, and Rockstar Games.
That's a very tough 3.
Yeah, and I have to give the edge to Naughty Dog, and I'll tell you why. So with Sony Santa Monica Studios, they're mostly known for the God of War franchise. And it wasn't until their most recent edition, which was Pushing Button Podcasts, 2018 Game of the Year, the one time we had a Game of the Year show. And of course, with Rockstar Games, they really pushed that narrative in the open world setting. And while I love Red Dead Redemption and what that's opened the door for future developers, I have to give the edge to Naughty Dog because they've made like the perfect cinematic experience. And for me, Uncharted, Last of Us, and with The Last of Us 2 coming out soon, I can't tell you, like, when I play those games, I am sucked in and I can't pull myself away unless I have to eat or sleep.
And even then, it can take a just sit on the back
Yeah,
burner.
exactly.
Sleep gets in the way. It's such a pain.
I still recall when Uncharted 2 came out, I played through the entire thing in like one sitting. It was crazy.
And the way they make those games, and we said the term a lot on our podcast, but cinematic, uh, they tell a story and the environment gets you right into it. Like it's so much good storytelling and also motion capture on the face and these amazing settings and man, they suck you right in. Those are fantastic. The lighting, everything about those games is really really good.
I think what I like most about Naughty Dog is that they've kind of grown up as a company as we have. They
Mhm.
started off with Crash Bandicoot, kind of leveled up to Jack and Daxter, and now are doing these cinematic masterpieces like Uncharted and The Last of Us. Seeing their evolution as a game developer, kind of going in line with how our interests change, growing up from kids to now being adults. It's nice seeing that.
Yeah, it's very exciting to see unfold.
Yeah, it's a very good observation there. That's slick. Yeah, they man, those that Jack and Daxter, that's like a forgotten gem right there. I'm surprised that's not being remade. Actually, now I'm thinking about it.
Oh, it
There should
probably
be
will be.
more.
Just give it a month or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, PS5 exclusive.
All right, for my number 3, this is the one indie game developer that I have on my list, unless you count CD Projekt Red. But Super Giant Games.
Oh, good
They've
choice.
only done 3.5 games so far. Their fourth one right now is in early access, so it's not done yet. But going from Bastion to Transistor to Pyre and now into Hades, they are 4 completely separate games that completely different in how they're played. But you can tell that each one of them has their trademark sound design, the audio, the music, the feeling of the game, the fluidity of the controls. Everything just has that signature Supergiant touch to it and just sucks you in from the minute you start playing until the minute you're done playing. And then you want to go back and play it again. Every
Yeah,
Supergiant game has done that to me. I've played Bastion twice. I've played Transistor almost twice. I've yet to play Pyre, but I've already put like, I don't know, 30 hours into Hades. And it's still not even out yet.
man, that is a good call right there. Bastion's my first, I would say, outside of like Minecraft, my first indie title that I was like, I have to go play that, and I went out and bought it. And then I just played Transistor a few months back because it was free on the Epic Game Store, and like, what a grab! That thing is beautiful.
Oh, it's such a beautiful game.
Yeah, that's a good choice there. Yeah, I don't have enough indie titles or indie companies on my list, and I'm glad you brought one up. That's a good one.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. All right, let's head into our number 2. Kyle, why don't you kick off number 2?
Oh man, I've had quite a bout between this and the number one.
Yeah.
Um, I do have to mention, like, both of these, if you know me, are pretty high on my list. Like in regards to like my all-time favorite video games.
Mm-hmm.
So number two for me is Nintendo.
Okay. Good. Good.
And
Good.
of course, there's so many different development teams over the years, but what I really wanted to focus on is their key vision for innovating. And we see that not only with their consoles, but also with their games. Each console handheld they release, they always try to up their game. We saw that with, of course, the N64 going into 64-bit gaming. Then you had the GameCube, which they tried to do the portable thing, but didn't really work out that generation
Right.
for them. And of course, their handhelds are stellar. Like the DS was game changing at the time, having two screens. Like that was unheard of in portable gaming. And then later on they had the Switch and the Wii, and those stepped the game up even further with motion controls and, console gaming and portability into one.
Yeah.
So seeing that evolution through the years, it also translates well into their game development. And of course, you have the Zelda series, the Mario series, and all their other franchises like Animal Crossing and whatnot. And for me personally, Breath of the Wild, what they've done for the open world game and that design in particular, it's really opened the floodgates for future innovation. And it's got me really excited to see what they have up their sleeves next.
Yeah, they're the most consistent name in gaming over the years too. And on the handheld thing, that brought up a good thought in my head here. So yeah, they've always had the heads up on gaming, or I'm sorry, on handheld gaming. I'm thinking, okay, so it was the Game Gear that Sega came out with,
Mhm.
and then I think it was Sony had the PSP. When they came out, both those systems were, technologically more advanced. They were the better systems. But Nintendo beat them out with quality games that they back up all their systems with never putting out anything that they didn't trust. There's always that seal, that golden seal that used to be on the front of all the Nintendo games, and so they beat them out in the long run, and which is crazy because I mean when the PSP came out, it had like this TV quality video and HD, near HD, and it was just blowing them out of the water. There, they had their own movie cartridges. I don't know if you guys had those, but I remember having Spider-Man 2 on that. And Napoleon Dynamite. And yeah, they always make high quality games.
I mean,
It's a good call.
it says a lot about them too that in the era of smartphones and how flooded the market is with them, like that they're
Mhm.
able to combine console gaming and portable gaming into the Switch, and for it to be successful at that, it just says a lot about how much their innovation has driven their business and their success.
Yeah, yeah, and they're such a staple of gaming that they are currently the only console allowed in China. I mean, that shows how important they are
That's
to the
crazy.
gaming industry. But they made a deal with Tencent. Tencent owns, I think it's 15% of the company, just so they can get their foot into China. There was such a high demand for that. So, man, they're out there. They're staples. Looking back, what is your favorite Nintendo system?
Man, that is a difficult thing to answer. I mean, I have such
Yeah,
fond memories with all the main consoles. I would say my favorite console is probably going to be the N64,
yeah,
just for the pure nostalgia value. Like
hmm
playing Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Like, there's nothing going to be able to replicate that jump from the 1632-bit era to the 64-bit era, where
yeah.
3D was just being explored for the first time. Yeah, that leap resonates with me the most.
That's a good choice there. Yeah, myself, I'm real tempted to go in 64 with you. I'm gonna choose the Game Boy though. It was crazy. I remember the fact that like, oh, the Game Boy is more powerful than the computers that put people on the moon. It was just so nuts how advanced we got to be able to put this in our hands. And I mean, we had Kirby. We had they ended up putting the '85 Mario on there. It had a whole slew of its own games that were really well done, and that system evolved quickly. So in my young childhood, I saw it go from this black and white with some blur to some awkward coloring to Game Boy Advance. I mean, it was so quick over like the 6 years that it came out that it was just like, man, we were in the future now. Like technology's moving quick. And I can't help but think it had some influence on what we have today in smartphones. So, this idea that you could have a whole computer in your pocket. It went through a shit ton of AA batteries, but it was a lot of fun.
They were always, whenever you went to the dentist office, that was the thing that I always looked forward to the most, was being able to play the Game Boy.
Yeah. What about you? What was your favorite one, Kev?
As tempted as I am also am to say the N64, because that was the one that I had the most fond memories of as a kid. Um, Even now as an adult, I have to say the Super Nintendo. The games are just more replayable to me. I love
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Country. I love Super Mario 3 and Super Mario World. That was the first Mario Kart. Just so many good games. Paper Mario, was that on there? No, I'm thinking Super Mario RPG. I just had to correct myself there. Super Mario RPG was so good. It's just countless games.
How was
Countless.
that not remade?
Right?
That's crazy. That is such a good game.
Because they're already perfect games.
Yeah, that's
You can
true.
go back and play them now. Yeah, that's exactly it.
If you have the Switch, guys, $20 a year, and you have access to a whole library of NES and Super Nintendo games. And I'm going through Super Mario World on that thing, and it's the best thing I'm playing on the Switch right now.
Heck
It's
yeah.
really good. All right, man, good. That was a really good choice for your number 2.
Thank you.
All right, let's go into my number 2. This one, I had a hard time being realistic about this and not putting it number 1. It is Blizzard Entertainment. So, founded in 91 as Silicon and Synapses, which is such a catchy name. These guys, these early days, they knew how to name things, you know. It was founded by Mike Morhaime, which is a legend who just retired last year, or no, 2 years ago. Frank Pierce and Alan Adden. They started with Rock and Roll Racing and Lost Vikings. What's really cool is over the years they keep referring back to these 2 games, these games that were in their roots. And so, like Overwatch, while you're setting up, you can see like a Lost Viking arcade machine set up in the corner and stuff like that. It's really cool. In World of Warcraft, there are, let's see, I think is it in Uldum? There's a boss that's actually 3 Vikings there with the right coloring and everything like that, and named after these guys.
Oh, nice.
And then they really stepped it up with Warcraft, Orcs, and Humans. This led to an entire empire. They got StarCraft that was somewhat based off this game with its playstyle. They, of course, had World of Warcraft. It really launched them off. And then they had Diablo and Overwatch. In the early days especially, Blizzard was known for not a lot of IPs, but really high quality, high polished IPs. They didn't put out a game that they didn't have 100% approval on. And I respected them for that. And so did a lot of other people. They gained a huge cult following, so much so that they started a yearly convention called BlizzCon. If you guys listen to the show, you know that we're huge fans of BlizzCon. They were founders, not the founders, but founders of esports. What was StarCraft? It was huge and was played up until the launch of StarCraft 2. And then in StarCraft 2, to this day, I think it launched in 2011, if not 2010, is still a huge esport. They helped create Dota 2, which was created in their engine for Warcraft 3. So Dota 2, which is the biggest esport in the world right now, was created with Blizzard in mind. They've created an entire community with World of Warcraft that's lasted 17 years. There are people who've been playing that game and paying their $15 a month for 17 years. No other video game. I can't think of another game that has that, you know? And I know you're sitting there like, man, yeah, they probably stopped here and there. No, they gave out trophies 2 years ago to everybody who's kept their sub up the entire time. So, and people are getting these trophies, these statues of orcs, for 15 years, or 15 years of $15 a month. So pretty amazing. They started this campus lifestyle, which now is something you see at like Google and stuff like that, where at the campus, if you're working for them, you could take your breaks, you go do tennis, go do this, go do that. It was more of a life and not so much a workplace. You know, you had friends that worked with you. You felt good going into work, not like it was work. Now they have been susceptible to crunch culture, like all others in the gaming industry. They work on that. And I totally, that's something they need to work on. But they have early on taken the steps against that. They have since teamed up with Activision, which many of us Blizzard fans are like, shit, Activision, But they still show that they have these moments where they're still the old school Blizzard. And they are the reason I have some of my friends today that, we BS and stuff like that. It's because we met each other through guilds on World of Warcraft. So Blizzard's actually, a big part of my life, and they were really cool. That's my number 2. You guys play? Well, I know Kyle's answer.
Absolutely,
Kevin. Is there any Blizzard game out there, Kevin, that you're a big fan of?
Diablo 2 was my life when I was in middle school and just starting in high school. That was the thing that I played, and I played the most of that out of any Blizzard game to date. Incredible series.
Yeah, excellent game. And that's another one that was played until, it's still played today, but people were playing that actively until Diablo 3 came out. That shows how well done those games were. Kyle, I know you play a lot of World of Warcraft, but what was your first Blizzard game you played?
Actually, it was the original Warcraft. I was introduced to it at an early age. My older brother had a PC, and he would play all those old school RTSs like Command and Conquer, Warcraft, etc. And I just remember really vividly the art style just really stood out for the time.
That's pretty good one. That is an old school one. Mine is StarCraft, the first StarCraft, and I remember we had the one computer in the parents' room, and so, and it was my first online game too. I'm sitting there playing, and they're like, "Frank, you need to go to bed. Frank, you need to go to bed." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." So I'm like trying to stay real quiet, like softly click the mouse, so I guess they can go to sleep and I can keep playing. Man, and to this day, you first thing you do, I can remember type in power overwhelming, get yourself unlimited power and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just such a classic game. They definitely instilled themselves in me. Kevin, what is your number two?
So my number two has a little bit more lineage than my number three does. Number two is LucasArts. And you may
Oh,
be
okay.
thinking, hey, Kevin, you said at the beginning of this podcast that you're a big Star Wars fan. Is that why you're picking
Mhm.
LucasArts? And yes, that's about half of it. But they're not around anymore, and they haven't made Star Wars games in a while. So that's actually not the main reason. The main reason is the adventure games that they pioneered, perfected, and are still being remade, remastered to this day. Like Day of the Tentacle, you've got Maniac Mansion, you got the Monkey Island series, all those classic adventure games that whenever you stop and think about the origins of that genre, you can't avoid thinking about LucasArts 100%.
Totally agree, man. Monkey Island. Damn, that's in the history books right there. That's a good one. Yeah, I didn't. It's funny because I have to be one of those that would be a victim of thinking, oh yeah, it's just Star Wars. But no, that's a good library right there. Um, of their Star Wars titles, though, what was your favorite one?
Oh man. I I don't remember exactly when they stopped doing all the Star Wars stuff themselves, because I'd like to say Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, but that was, I think, developed by Raven, not by
Okay,
LucasArts. I loved the Pod Racer game for the N64.
yeah, that was good.
God, there's a ton of them though.
Yeah, the Pod Racer game was really good. I especially liked it when you got to see it in an arcade because they actually had like the pod itself. I don't know if you saw any of those where
Oh
it was
yeah,
like you're sitting in a pod.
you've got the throttles that you one
Yeah,
goes forward and backward, the other one goes. You use it to turn left and right.
yep.
Heck yeah.
Sunk some quarters into that bad boy.
The X-Wing and TIE Fighter series games were also really good. Some of my earliest PC gaming memories were actually on the 5.25 inch really floppy disk drives. You know, when floppy disks were actually floppy.
Oh
Playing
yeah. Oh yeah.
Zach McCracken. That was a text-based adventure game in the style of, the first Monkey Island and stuff. And I'm not sure which came first there, but I remember my brother and I trying to figure out that game. God, we had to have been. I was probably 6 years old or so when we were playing that. And oh man, some of my earliest gaming memories and fantastic stuff.
That's legendary, man. I mean, and back then you couldn't just Google it. I mean,
Oh
you had
yeah,
to
no.
solve it. I remember we go to the grocery store and I'd be like, "Look, you can find whatever groceries you want. I got to go to the magazine aisle because they'd have like the video game magazines. I just need some help." And then you'd go to like what games I'm playing. Look for the cheat codes you can.
Yeah.
I used to have a little library of cheat codes in the back. Get what you can while you're there. Oh man, that's classic. I'm thinking, man, those old floppies. I want to say that my main game I was playing was Carmen San Diego on those things.
Oh shoot, I forgot about those games. Those were fun too.
Yeah, those loud clicking and thing the drive would make. Oh my god, how did we advance from that? It's unreal.
Hey,
Oh man.
that's crazy.
Okay, so you know what, Kevin? Let's go ahead and have you start off with number one.
All right, number one. Oh, I think I'm ready for this. All right, my number one, and I'm ready for the flack that I'm about to get, is
Here we
BioWare.
go.
Oh,
Okay,
BioWare.
okay.
BioWare is my number one. I, I will say specifically because of the first Mass Effect game,
I was gonna wonder. Yeah, okay.
but beyond that, their classic RPG games, Neverwinter Nights, and games that pretty much took what Blizzard did with Diablo and made them a little, based more on, I guess, Icewind Dale and that ilk, like the really
Hmm.
hardcore RPG games, and then they evolved from there into games like Dragon Age and Knights of the Old Republic, and what you see with, I guess, Anthem to some extent today, for better or for
unfortunately.
worse. Yeah, before BioWare was bought out by Electronic Arts, they had, it was just that BioWare trust. Any game that they put out, you could trust that it was going to be fantastic. And you could tell the turning point, specifically with me, between Mass Effect 1 and Mass Effect 2 is when
Yeah.
that changed. But Mass Effect 1 I've got some of my best gaming moments. That was actually one of the first games I ever got I teared up. I got emotional over it. And it wasn't even the ending. It was like right before the ending. Oh, just if you haven't played it, play it.
Yeah, games can do that, man. I mean, you are the character. You're more attached than you would to a film. Yeah.
It's BioWare's writing that actually made me realize that I could feel that way about video games, honestly, and that's why they're my number one.
Now you said that you discovered it between 1 and 2, and I want to say most people would think it's after 2. What between the two made you think that there's going to be a shift coming?
2 felt more like it was going the way of a Michael Bay film than a BioWare video game. It was all about the big set pieces and the explosions, and they totally did away with the cast and crew from the first game, and it just rewrote everything that was going on. They even brought a new ship in, killed off the captain, or killed off Shepard at the beginning. It's insane. It was it was as jarring as going from, if you went straight from Star Trek: The Next Generation to Star Trek Discovery, just that jump from one to the other, just so different.
It was a bit of a stretch. Back then we didn't really give it too much thought, but when you really think about it, the whole idea that they scrapped everything Mass Effect 1 stood for and just kind of redid everything, from the ground up, the foundation. It was really quite odd that they went in that direction.
But I think a lot of that was from the feedback that they got from the first Mass Effect game, that the combat was a little janky. But honestly, I didn't care about that. I loved the story and the writing and the RPG elements to it that they totally did away with in Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, and it reminds me of back in the day when you had two different companies working on the Call of Duty games, and you could almost feel the two different companies they're almost like different games that just had the same title. It was like Call of Duty 2 was Infinity Ward or something like that. And then, the next one, Call of Duty 3, was a whole other company, didn't feel right. And then Call of Duty, Modern Warfare felt back and went back. And so you kind of had that feel where it was just like, this doesn't feel like it's made by the same guys. There's a whole other feeling to it. And then I liked how you were saying you used to be able to trust BioWare when games came out. That's something that we don't have nowadays, I feel like, where you just have trust in that company. You really got to play by ear now.
Yeah, but it was Mass Effect 2 and Dragon Age 2. Specifically Mass Effect 2 because of how much I love the first, but Dragon Age 2 was also a terrible game.
I have Dragon Age. I think the one I played was Dragon Age Inquisition, I think it was called.
They redeemed themselves a little bit with that one. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Funny thing about Anthem, I bought it brand new, and it's still in its wrapping. I have not opened it
yet. Man, you might get a 50 whole cents out of that now.
At this point, it's a matter of pride to keep that thing in its packaging.
That's a statement right there, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, I'll go ahead and start off with my number one. My number one is going to be super out of left field. It's called Carbine Studios. Are you guys familiar with them?
Carbine. Sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar. Yeah, exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. Founded by 17 former World of Warcraft developers in 2005, it brought on members from Diablo 2, StarCraft, Metroid Prime, Fallout, EverQuest, City of Heroes, and Half-Life 2. So basically, you got a stable of badasses, right? They set out to make an MMO that was difficult again. So this was about the time in 2005, World of Warcraft was just coming out, and they saw that World of Warcraft was going to start going into looking for groups, and it was starting to make that change into life is easier, let's just get more people on board. And they're like, no, it should be difficult. You should be leaning on the fact that the community has to be involved for anything to happen. So they wanted to make their own MMORPG that was going to be difficult and hard to do without 39 other people helping you. They started a game called WildStar. It's set in space.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's set in space. Yeah, and it took itself lighthearted. It was, a lot of joking every time you leveled up. He's like, whoa, you're a big shot now, and stuff like that. There's always a guy talking shit, basically. It was a lot of fun. And what this company did with this game was then mimicked by all the other big titles. And they were around for just a blink in the gaming world. So let me go over a couple of things here. They introduced housing into their game. And it was a thing where you're able to collect items and make your own house, and really you can mimic the properties any way you want. People made like these big AT-AT walkers, and they made giant castles and stuff like that. This predated Minecraft that came out. And then World of Warcraft right away put garrisons in the next expansion. So, everybody was trying to copy them. They had these two guys that would do this like weekly show where they would sit and stream like developer updates and, oh, here's some fan art and stuff like that. They were very streamer kind of personalities, And this was at a time before Twitch was really taking off too big. And, it was kind of all tucked away in corners. And now we have companies, again, like Blizzard, who do these updates where Q&As are happening and stuff like that. And it was maybe a year after that these guys started doing it, you started seeing other companies do that, where you have these digital online press events happening all the time. WildStar started that. Another thing was their economy. Their economy was based off of you put so many items in, and then they would automatically sell for whatever was the going price when somebody needed to take something out. That economy was mimicked by Elder Scrolls Online and Guild Wars 2, and then of course World of Warcraft. So many little things came out of this little Carbine Studios that made a little game called WildStar. They were bought in 2007, so that's only 2 years, by NCSoft. NCSoft then laid everybody off in 2016, and then in 2018 they decided to fully destroy Carbine and close down WildStar completely. So that was really like 2 years of life on their own, but in that 2 years they made so many bold choices that the gaming industry took note and adopted a lot of their policies. They're amazing. They have a couple, I shouldn't even say this on a podcast, they have some private servers out there, you guys. And super uber dedicated fans. It's one of the few games like World of Warcraft now at this point. I've leveled a lot of tunes to where it's almost like, okay, I just got to level this tune. I'm not going to pay attention to the storyline. The leveling process in WildStar was so good that you enjoyed the story every time. It was a lot of fun, lighthearted little quests that just brought a smile upon your face. There's one dungeon, again, everything's in space, where as you're doing it, you're slowly getting higher and higher, like induced highness. And by the last boss, you're tripping balls so much that you're fighting the vending machine that's throwing up rainbows. Like, it's just a weird, fun game. And that boss was fucking hard. Like, this game was not easy. It definitely required a lot of people to help. But unfortunately, it did not have a lot of people flocking to it because gamers tended to actually get used to the easier life. They weren't necessarily on board for the difficult gameplay of the original World of Warcraft. And by the end, there was only 2 40-man guilds actually active rating on on all the servers put together. So shows, all this money got put into a game for 80 decent players, and it's not a really good return on your investment. And unfortunately, they had to close things down. But yeah, that was Carbine Studio, guys. It's a great little company for a little while there.
Jeez. So you said they got bought out by NCSoft, right?
Yes, that was totally their downfall. When that happened too, like you could just feel it in the community. Everybody's just like shuddered. Oh, and then there comes the first shop mount. I was like, no!
That's insane. The only games that I can even think of from NCSoft were probably competitive MMOs to them. Like they did Star Trek Online, they did City of Heroes, City of Villains. Those are the only games that I could think of that NCSoft ever did.
They did Blade and Soul, which is still doing pretty good, but it's mostly a South Korean game. But yeah, that's pretty much it. They're all competitors. And when they bought them, you could feel the treatment was very kind of like, oh yeah, and we have WildStar. I was like, oh, that's stupid. And then they put them on Steam for like free.
I played it, yeah.
Yeah, it was a fun little game. Had a bright color palette and everything like that. I got a friend, Tabby, shout out to Tabby. She is such an Uber fan. Again, she's on those other servers we're not supposed to mention. But when they were starting to see troubles, she ran around to all her local Walmarts and Targets and bought up physical copies. She had stacks of physical copies just trying to send money to Carbine.
Oh, man, that's some dedication.
That's how their fans were. If they were given more years, they would have been the new Blizzard. They would have had their own conventions. They would have had... Dude, no joke, Tuesday mornings, I think it was Tuesday mornings, me and Tabby were on the phones texting back and forth like, hey, you ready? Here it goes. Here comes... I think it was like, what was it called? The Nexus. Yeah, that was their weekly stream. The Nexus, here comes... We were just like... live tweeting it to each other, basically. We were all excited about it. It was a really good stream. It was really well done. And now when you see like these big streamers, it's like, man, you guys are emulating what these guys set up so long ago. It was so classic. So, all right, Kyle, man, what is your number one?
Man, the pressure. So throughout this whole recording, we've talked about trusting developers nostalgia, and of course the all-encompassing view of game design and how we feel it's relevant to each of us. So with that being said, knowing me, Kevin, you probably already know who it is. It's going to be From Software, creators of the Dark Souls series. Shock and all.
Well, I was thinking like the reason I'm kind of shocked. I'm like, okay, yeah, Dark Souls, but what else? That's what I'm sitting there thinking of. Like, what else was there?
Well, for me, this was really, a discovery that came out of left field for me. I discovered From Software through Demon Souls, which was a PS3 exclusive at the time. And I've never played anything like it prior to discovering that game. And of course, in subsequent years, they've only stepped up their game with Dark Souls and Bloodborne, and now with Sekiro more recently. And I just feel like, as a company, they have this philosophy that speaks to me personally. They put out a product, they want as much people to play it, but they don't want to compromise their integrity. And they don't add difficulties for that reason. They feel like that would fragment all of their players. Whereas if it's just one single difficulty, it unites that community to talk to each other, to piece together not only the best strategies for defeating the boss characters or even regular enemies, but also to piece together the lore behind the games. And to me, that's the most exciting part about From Software's design. They go with like a minimalistic style, which I think translates really well to natural discovery by the player. And not only that, but to make it a role playing game. I feel like, for me personally, like, I'm in the game when I play it. And I don't say that very often about games. It's really rare. Like, the only other time I really feel that way is with the Legend of Zelda series.
Yeah.
And what they've done, mainly with Miyazaki, he's the main director, president of the company. His designs for the enemies, like, these are all his personal designs. He would read lots of gothic horror for inspiration for his designs. That's what led to Bloodborne, which is one of my all-time favorite games. And overall, I just feel like they can't do anything wrong. They're gonna always deliver quality games. We've seen it time and time again. And even thinking back on like older games, I feel like Dark Souls and that whole genre of gaming, it's similar to the old NES days when you'd have a random platformer that you couldn't beat because of how frustrating it was.
Ninja Gaiden, I'm looking at you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's been so many games analyzed in the past, like, that are notorious for being difficult to beat the game. But with, From Software's games, you earn that victory. Like, you feel like you've achieved a great feat whenever you make progress in the game. And that's why I love them so much. Like, for me, it's like invoked that feeling, that spirit inside of myself whenever I play one of their games. And that's why they're my number one developer.
Dude, that is such a great pick, man. Because I'm thinking now, like, the community thing's really good point. They don't deliver much, but there are a bunch of people farming content as much as they can out of these. And there's Discords dedicated to them, Reddit's dedicated to them, entire communities, and looking for any clues they can. And then another thing I was thinking is they kind of created their own genre, because I mean, countless times I say like, oh yeah, it's a kind of like a Dark Souls.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? It's
Yes.
It's like it's in a new genre now.
This is another reason why I love them so much. They've inspired, so many spin-offs, copycat games, but even those games have kind of innovated their individual genres. The number one example of this is Hollow Knight by Team Cherry. Like, the Metroidvania style, Dark Souls inspired design. That is a fantastic game, up and down. Everything about it is perfect. I would have included them on this list, but I wanted to give Kevin the indie game nom. But I loved Hollow Knight, and of course, being inspired by Dark Souls, it made total sense.
The game I like the best, I think, is inspired by them, is For Honor. Have you guys played that yet?
I have not, no.
I
Okay.
watched a bunch of it when it came out, but that's Ubisoft, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it is Ubisoft. Yeah. I really liked it, and the whole time I'm playing it, I'm talking to my buddy who finished it. And I'm like, dude, this feels like the Dark Souls, because it has that thing where you're going along and there's some easier targets, but then you're like locked in this one-on-one, and it's that transition that's really nice. And then and then we're looking at Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
That's the one I was going to mention.
I was going to bring that up too. I know Kevin's a fond of that game.
Yeah, Kevin, speak to that and how much it's taken an example.
So I've never played a Dark Souls game before, and I didn't think that I'd ever play one that was inspired by it. And then Jedi Fallen Order came out of nowhere and is one of the most incredible games I've played in the last few years. It was my game of the year 2019 for sure. It took that inspiration and just it did have difficulty levels, so they iterated on it a bit, made it their own, and made a beautiful Star Wars game in the process.
Have you heard rumors of Project Maverick?
No.
Yeah, that's the next Star Wars game that apparently they're working on that they're going to be announcing very soon this month. So it's fingers crossed for that, and hopefully it's the next Fallen Order game.
Excellent.
Yeah.
My heart's racing now.
Yeah, Project Maverick, look it up. It's pretty interesting. All right, what were you saying there, Kyle, before I cut you off?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to mention, playing Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, like it was a really challenging game. Like I couldn't even finish it when it first came out because it was so difficult. I had to reteach myself how to play their games because it was so different in style from Dark Souls. And I picked it up later in the year last year and I finally beat it. And that feeling just came flooding back and just that in general. That's why I love From Software.
Yeah. Yeah, that they take their own kind of studying and mastering. A lot of games do that you fall in love with, you know what I'm saying? Like I know we've mentioned them a few times in this episode. World of Warcraft though, like when I come back to it and I'm like gonna play seriously, I have to get my mind in that thing where I'm like, okay, I'm moving with my hands, but I can't be paying attention to that because I gotta look at rotation and where I'm at. And it's the same thing with that, where you're like, okay, yeah, but I need to make it to where dodge and maybe parry and stuff like that are just second nature so I can work on other things. You have to kind of learn how to ride that bike again. Okay, I think that is going to be it for our top fives. I think we had some amazing lists here. Let's get one more shout out for you guys' streams. Kyle, what was your stream again?
Yes, twitch.tv/MonumentusKyle. And right now I don't have a stream schedule, but best way to find out if I am streaming is following my Twitter, also at MonumentusKyle.
Okay, and Kevin, what is your stream and Twitter?
All right, you can find me at twitch.tv/KevinJection. I am also at KevinJection on Twitter. I also currently don't have much of a schedule, but you can find me on Friday nights on twitch.tv/KevinJection streaming with these two lovely folks.
Yes, please join us for community night every Friday night at 7 p.m. PST. And I cannot suggest it enough. Check out their old podcast, Pushing Buttons. You guys notice how they knew their developers well and the insight behind them. That's the part that I fell in love with. And you guys can find more about that. And please hang out with them. I can't suggest it enough. All right, guys, we have so much coming to you guys this week. The next episode will be a deep dive on the Ubisoft company. Have a good week. Thank you for joining us on the Geek Freaks podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Geek Freaks Pod. We're also on Facebook, Instagram. You can email us. We have our Patreon and a store. All those links are in the description.